What's going on, everybody, and welcome to my review of 28 Days Later, released back in 2002. This film is just phenomenal. I absolutely adore it. It's one of those movies that completely grabs you right from the opening frame and doesn't let go until the very end. Even after the credits roll, it just sticks with you. It leaves you thinking, unsettled, but also kind of in awe of how well it all comes together. The story is gripping, the characters feel incredibly real and grounded, and the world they inhabit is both fully realized and frighteningly plausible. There's this oppressive, almost suffocating atmosphere that the movie builds and maintains all the way through, and you just can't help but get completely locked into it. Every time I rewatch this film, and I've seen it plenty, it still manages to have that same impact. It never loses its edge, and that, to me, is the sign of something truly special. What makes 28 Days Later so fascinating, especially when you dig into the behind-the-scenes side of it, is how much it accomplishes with relatively limited resources. This wasn't some giant Hollywood production with a bottomless budget or massive studio backing. Director Danny Boyle and writer Alex Garland really had to think outside the box to make this work. They shot the entire film using digital video cameras, something that, at the time, wasn't exactly the norm for feature films. But that decision actually became one of the movie's biggest highlights. Because those cameras were smaller and more portable, they could capture these incredible, haunting shots of real locations like the empty streets of London without needing huge crews or tons of permits. Some of the most iconic sequences, like Jim wandering through a completely deserted London, were shot incredibly early in the morning, with just a tiny skeleton crew, before the city fully woke up. They only had small windows of time to get the footage they needed, and then they'd quickly clear out. It's honestly amazing how well it turned out. The way they were able to capture that eerie emptiness really adds to the unsettling mood of the movie. You're looking at these familiar places that should be bustling with people, and instead, they're completely silent. It makes the collapse of society feel so much more immediate and real, and that realism becomes one of the film's most powerful tools. Ironically, the limitations of their budget forced them to get creative, and that creativity ended up being one of the biggest reasons the film works as well as it does. Now, when it comes to the story itself, it's deceptively simple, but executed so well. We follow Jim, played by Cillian Murphy, who wakes up alone in a hospital to find that the world he knew is gone. A highly contagious virus called Rage has swept through the population, turning people into these hyper-aggressive, mindlessly violent infected. Society has completely collapsed in the span of just a few weeks. As Jim tries to figure out what's going on, he eventually crosses paths with other survivors like Selena, Frank, and Hannah. Together, they try to survive not just the infected, but also the darker side of humanity that emerges in the aftermath of civilization's collapse. What I really love about this movie is that it's not just a straightforward survival horror story. Yes, there are terrifying infected, but some of the most intense, disturbing moments come from dealing with other people. It explores the psychological and emotional strain of surviving in a world where the rules no longer apply. Trust becomes a scarce commodity. You're constantly left wondering, who can you rely on? What's the right thing to do when the world around you no longer has a moral compass? How far are people willing to go to survive? And what kind of person do you become when faced with those decisions? It's those heavier, more grounded questions that elevate the film beyond just being a simple horror flick. It becomes this deeply human, character-driven story about survival, loss, and the fragility of civilization itself. The performances across the board are just outstanding. Cillian Murphy absolutely carries the movie as Jim. His performance feels so genuine, you can see the confusion, fear, and gradual shift in his character as he adapts to this brutal new world. His journey from this disoriented, overwhelmed survivor to someone who's capable of taking incredibly dark and decisive actions is handled so well. Naomie Harris as Selena is equally fantastic. She's tough, pragmatic, and determined to survive, but she's not emotionless. You see layers to her character as the film progresses, especially in her relationship with Jim. Brendan Gleeson brings so much heart and warmth to Frank, and Megan Burns as Hannah gives a really grounded performance as his daughter. All the characters feel authentic, and their relationships give the movie its emotional core. You care about them, which makes every moment of danger that much more intense. The pacing is another thing that works incredibly well. The The film doesn't just rush from one action scene to the next. It takes its time to build atmosphere and let you sit with the characters and their situation. You get these quieter, more reflective moments where the tension simmers beneath the surface, and then when the action does kick in, it hits that much harder. And man, the infected themselves are absolutely terrifying. Unlike the traditional slow-moving zombies we're used to seeing, these infected are fast, relentless, and brutal. That added speed completely changes the dynamic of every encounter. The stakes feel so much higher because you know how quickly things can go wrong. Every chase scene, every close call has this frantic, desperate energy that keeps you completely on edge. And of course, I have to talk about the score because the music in this film is phenomenal. John Murphy's work here is so haunting and memorable. That main theme, In the House in a Heartbeat, is absolutely iconic. It perfectly encapsulates the mood of the film, this mixture of dread, sorrow, and a faint glimmer of hope. Even outside of the movie, just hearing that track immediately brings back the emotions of those intense scenes. It's one of those pieces of music that stays with you long after the movie's over and really helps cement 28 Days Later as something special. Now, if there's one thing that really holds 28 Days Later back for me, it's the digital video look. And I'm not just talking about a minor nitpick here, it genuinely hasn't aged well at all. While I get that the intention was to give it a gritty, grounded feel, watching it now on modern screens really makes the limitations stand out. The image can get distractingly grainy, soft, and at times even kind of ugly. It takes away a bit from the immersive experience, especially when you're so used to seeing crisp, polished visuals in more recent films. There are moments where the roughness works for the atmosphere, sure, but just as often it feels like a product of the time rather than a creative choice that fully holds up today. I honestly wish they had found a better balance, because visually, it does make parts of the movie feel a little dated and rougher than they probably intended. So overall, 28 Days Later is easily one of my favorite entries in the zombie or infected genre. It's intense, emotional, and incredibly well crafted, especially when you consider the constraints they were working under. This movie proves that you don't need a massive budget or tons of spectacle to tell a powerful, gripping story. It's the kind of film that stays with you long after you've watched it, and every time I revisit it, I walk away impressed all over again. I absolutely adore this film, and I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10. So, what do you guys think of this movie? Do you love it, think it's just okay, or maybe even dislike it? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to comment below. Please like, subscribe, and share this video. I really appreciate your support. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.